Welcome to the Young and Bold segment on our Maintain Monday show with Elevation Global Media Group. I'm your host, Crystal.
And I'm Destiny Bell. Since it's holiday season, we've decided to talk about all things family. And usually during the holidays, most families come together to celebrate fun things. And it's like the one time you see like both sides, your mom and your dad.
Right. So it's like a family reunion in the fall and winter time. So with that being said, today's show will be centered around blended families. And the guests we have today, they will give us advice on how to deal with bringing different families together with love.
And to define the blended family, for those out there, a blended family is when two people start a relationship that have children by someone else before starting that relationship, bringing the two families together to become one big happy family. Happy family is subjective, though. And that's what we're getting into today.
So yeah, we're definitely going to get into all of that. But this show is pretty much for a young couple that may have children. Let's say you're in a relationship, your boyfriend or girlfriend may have a child, and then you have a child of your own, but then you guys coming together, of course, to bring a family all together. In most cases, especially like I would say the younger generation, that is definitely a struggle. But like I said, we'll get into that conversation. And I just want to bring the guest on, before we dig deep. So most of you already know our guest. She used to be a host here with the Maintain Monday shows with Cassandra. She and her husband has a blended family, and they're here to share some insight on how to handle it without the drama, stress, and anything that comes along with it. So before we get into the conversation, I want you guys to take a look at this video.
Kip, would you agree that the way you're handling this isn't working?
I agree that my attitude is wrong and disrespectful, okay? I'm not a mean or cruel person. I'm not. I'm really not.
There's more involved here than just you. You said, I want to build a new house, but I ain't doing it till she's gone.
Right.
How do you think that makes her feel?
And Dr. Phil McGraw joins us now with some advice for blended families, and there are a lot of them. Dr. Phil, good morning. Good to see you.
There are a lot of blended families, Chris. I mean, it's growing every day. There are 1,300 new blended families formed every single day. And there are now more families that are remarried, recoupled, than there are first marriages. So it has now become the majority of the marriages in America fall in this category.
You hear the constant numbers of the divorce rate being 50%, which is staggering enough. But like you mentioned, you bring kids in and the numbers that you just mentioned alone. What are some of the big hurdles, though, for blended families?
Well, here's the thing. When you get in this situation, there are three really big challenges that you have to face. Number one, if you are the step parent, what's your role going to be? I mean, how are you defined to the children? What are you going to be, disciplinarian, just a supporter for the biological parent? What's your role going to be? That's a big thing. Number two, you're going to face resentment because these kids, before you got there, the bio parent, undivided loyalty. They had their undivided attention. And here comes the new parent, the step parent. They are competing for attention. And so there is often resentment towards that person coming from the outside. And then there gets to be this conflict, number three, about whether or not you're going to discipline the way that the other parent wants to discipline, the step parent. This can create a lot of conflict between the husband and the wife with the kids right in the middle. And that's why those marriages they really don't have a great prediction in terms of how they're going to work out. A lot of remarriages and blended families don't work out.
Yeah, but of course, you have some advice, and you say one of the first things you really need to do is acknowledge the challenge ahead, because it is a challenge. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
here.
look, sit down and talk about this, right? I mean, the kids know that this is an awkward situation. You know it's an awkward situation. So sit down and say, look, this is tough for everybody. I don't know exactly what to do. You don't know how to feel about me. I'm not trying to replace your mother or your father, but I have married your parent here. Yeah. So this is tough. Let's just talk about it and see if we can come up with a plan.
Yeah, tip 2, you say there's a time and a place to discuss any and all conflicts. What is that time and place?
Oh boy, it's not in front of the kids. Look, kids are smart, and they understand this divide and conquer business.
And they hear everything.
Oh, they do. They hear everything. The walls have ears. You need to go private with this, Mom and Dad, and come up with a plan that both of you can be excited about, but don't hash this out in front of the kids.
Yeah, and the complaining never really works.
Look,
it becomes background noise after a while, doesn't it?
There comes a point where you have to stop complaining and start asking specifically for what you want, particularly with the kids and with your spouse. Instead of saying, I don't like this, I don't like that, this isn't fair, this isn't right, be specific. What I need is this. And maybe they'll give you that, maybe they won't, but it's a starting place to negotiate.
When it comes to discipline, I think with parents alone, okay, just parents of their child, it becomes a good cop, bad cop. But then when you factor in step parents, how much more difficult does that make the situation?
Well, it's almost impossible. If the step parent is not involved before the age of 4 or 5, they cannot and should not be involved in the direct discipline of the stepchildren. They don't have the bond, because you have to understand, from the kid's point of view, this isn't their parent. This is their mother's husband or their husband's wife. It's just somebody that mom or dad brought in, and they don't give them the right to discipline them, so they're not going to acknowledge it. Don't try to be the primary disciplinarian if you are a step parent that got in the game after the age of 4 or 5.
There are some things you just can't change. You got to let it play out.
That's right.
Final tip, you say it's important to establish some personal relationships as well.
Look, and this is true not just with stepchildren, it's true with all of your children. If you've got 3 kids, step or otherwise, you need to have something that you do with that child that is unique to them, that you carve out for them. And I know with my boys, I had one that we played with a farm in the floor. We had little animals and we had a fence, and I didn't do that with the other one. That was this for this child. For the other one, he liked to bomb things. So we would get up on the balcony and bomb the farm. And that's what I did with him. We'd drop tennis balls on it and see how many things we could knock over. And that was special to each one of those kids. They need to know they've got something that is uniquely theirs.
The son with the farm wasn't too happy, but the other son.
No. Those animals looked a little worn after a few days.
Dr. Phil, great to see you. Thanks again.
Good to see you, Chris.
Dr. Phil McGraw. And you can see the entire episode of the Dr. Phil Show later today. Check your local listings.
Welcome. Thank you guys for coming. So, can you
no problem. Thank you.
Can you give us a little bit about yourself, some background, some tea?
Some tea. You want like tea? That. Well, you want to start?
You can go right ahead.
Okay. So my name is Placida. Of course, you know, this is Eric, and we have an organization called the Braswell Wellness Group, which is we provide healing, hope, and help for relationships in life. And one of the reasons why we can do that so well is because we do it every day. As you mentioned, Destiny and Crystal, as a family of 10. We are a family of 10, a blended family of 10. And so we have on-the-job experience with healing, hope, and, you know, just building and growing relationships. So I will say the tea part of this is that when we got married, I brought 5 booze to the party, okay? I brought 5 booze. Well, I had 4 in my first marriage, and then I adopted a child, and so I had 5. And Eric had 3 children. This is the second marriage for both of us. His first wife passed away, unfortunately. And so he was a single dad with 3 children. And so, yep, that's a little bit about us.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us that background. Your story already interesting. It's giving movie.
Okay, so let's just dig right deep into the conversation. Now, you guys saw the video, and I wanted to ask, do you guys agree with Dr. Phil on, it was a couple of things where he said it don't work out. Most blended families don't work out. Do you guys agree with that? And then also he talked about the discipline aspect as the step parent. Do you agree that if you're not in a child's life by the age of 4, I think he said, how do you guys handle the discipline aspect for your stepchild?
So that second question, I want that one, so I'm gonna give him the first one. Okay, I'm gonna start with the discipline. I absolutely disagree that discipline should only come from the biological parent.
Right.
My philosophy going in and what I have seen work is this: you cannot discipline someone who you have not loved.
Right. And does not feel, and that has not felt your love. They don't feel seen and heard by you. It's hard for them to actually receive any correction. Why should I, if your goal towards me is rarely felt a loving connection? Because really that should be the vision of all of your relationships.
Yep. And so with that, the first step prior to any discipline is to deposit those seeds of love where you have true relationship with those children. But my philosophy is this, and this wasn't scientific. It isn't, though I do have a degree in marriage and family. That is my degree. However, my philosophy came more from life experience, from actually parenting many children, even prior to the fact that I had a blended family myself. What happens is when you deposit those seeds of love, you develop trust. There is money in the bank with that child. But so when it comes time to discipline them, there's actually a foundation from which they can receive that discipline, right? Because discipline is not punishment, it's discipline. It's meant to correct. It's not meant to hurt, harm, or endanger the child. And so when I'm disciplining you, I have to maybe in some cases, well, in all cases, I have to be super clear about what the discipline is for, why I'm doing it, and it cannot be emotional in its nature. In other words, I'm not beating the child, 2 inches from their life, right? And calling that discipline. That's not discipline, that's abuse.
Right.
But discipline is structured. It's expected. So for example, if my child has a curfew and they break curfew, they understand what the consequences will be for breaking curfew. And I'm not going to go above and beyond because I'm angry and do some outlandish thing to them. But they understand that if you come in past your curfew, then there's going to be some consequences that you receive. That doesn't change how I love you. That doesn't change how I show up for you. But it does help you to structure your behavior more effectively so we both get the outcomes that we need. And most importantly, you remain safe. And so, no, I don't agree. I think that is an old school kind of way of thinking of discipline. But I say it like this. I give you my love equally, so I'm going to give you my discipline equally as well.
Right. You can't have one and not have the other. You have to have both, and, going back to, I believe your first question, could you repeat your first question? Because I want to make sure I'm answering or responding to it clearly.
So in the beginning, Dr. Phil said, he just straight off the back said most blended families do not work. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. Reason why I agree with it and disagree with it is because of this, is that very few people, when it comes to the area of relationships on any level, very few seek out education or training and support from the outside. So yes, what he is saying is true. It won't last. But the reason why that does happen is that nobody's going to counseling or therapy or some type of support to learn how to beforehand, how to, like maybe like in the engagement, during the engagement stage, or when you see the relationship ramping up to where, hey, I think this might be heading towards a family. Let me go get some counseling. Let me set up a therapy appointment with a family counselor. Let me find a support group that can help me with my parenting skills.
Yeah.
That, and I've been, this past couple of weeks been teaching this with some colleagues of mine with when it comes to family skills and working with constructs of structural family therapy. One of the things you have to realize is that without core values intact, without having the skills and tools and training, listen, even for your own, whether you got biological kids or non-biological kids, you need training.
You need support.
And
so just to be super clear about the answer to the question, unfortunately, what he said is true.
Yes.
Most blended families do not work. However, they can work with the proper support. Absolutely. So there are many that have thrived. And I choose to focus on those families that have thrived, or the families that are not thriving right now, but are reaching for resource. They are reaching out for the help and the support for shows like this that can give them tips on how to move more effectively in their relationships.
Right.
Okay. So, in keeping things in the topic of discipline, I know that sometimes, I do have a stepdad, but I know sometimes children feel that their step parent is harder on them than their children. So, like, given that you have blood and bonus children, did you ever find yourself being harder on one than the other? And how did you navigate that process? Because at some point you have to be, what is the word? You have to treat them equally and you have to be fair. Right. But I'm sure that it's a natural bias in either one. So how
I'm so glad you said that, Destiny.
Yes, admit that. Acknowledge that.
Yes, that is it, Destiny. Thank you. The natural bias that exists, if we act like we don't see it, we fail. If we act like we don't understand, we fail. The reason why is because I have to have empathy. Let me use our family as an example. Mm-hmm. He has 2 girls and 1 boy. He was a girl dad for the most part. I was a boy mom. I have 4 boys and 1 girl, right? So I come to the relationship with more of a stern posture of parenting than he does. He comes to the relationship, he's very tender. He's very loving. He uses lots of words of affirmation, and that works real well for the girls. What I didn't understand, though, was that it was also going to work for my boys. I had to be brave enough to let him parent them in the way that he parents and see what that outcome was. And what I found was that my boys loved it. They were still tough dudes, but they were able to explore a side of them that they weren't fully exploring with just me parenting them in the way that I was parenting. They were able to see a man who was free in his emotions, who was able to show them that love. So why am I bringing this up when we talk about the natural biases? Well, of course, I was a little bit uncomfortable with what that produces. I thought, why are you whining so much? Why just do it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just telling you what was going on in my head, because I had natural biases towards how I parent and therefore how my children were. He had natural biases towards how he parented and therefore how his children showed up. What we had to then do was be open enough to be flexible and to learn and to grow. Both of us had learning and growing to do. Mm-hmm. There were things that maybe needed correction on both sides. Mm-hmm. There were things that needed, to be considered on both sides. And so that is going to impact how I relate to my children and how I relate to his. Yeah. I had to get used to my oldest daughter's name is Alexis. I had to get used to how she showed up and not critical of it. Mm-hmm. I had to begin to try to implement understanding and empathy in the place of judgment. As the Bible says, mercy triumphs over judgment. And so I had to show mercy in areas that I didn't understand. So yes, and even with all of that, I still have to understand that there was a solid foundation of relationship that happened with him and his children before I ever showed up. And it's natural for them to still have that relationship. In fact, I encourage it because I don't want my children to feel insecure in their adulthood, in their personhood. I want them to be full, whole human beings. So those daddy-daughter dates that they were going on, please still go on them. Right? And so if you have these conversations out loud, you create space for the nuances that exist in family. Every family is unique, and we do not need to treat every child. And one thing that Dr. Phil said that is very true. Each child is special. Yes. They are unique. They are made and they're formed in God's image, but they are who they are. Mm-hmm. And so we need to allow the space for every child to be who they are, and for each parent to have individual relationships with each of those children.
Right. Okay. And can I just speak to that for a moment? Because to do that, it takes intentionality for the parent, on the parent's behalf. They have to be intentional about touching every child in a connecting, empathetic way, because children want leadership and children want secure attachment. It's just a matter of knowing how to give it to them. What is the thing that motivates them to respond back in love, that wants to respond back and feel connected and be willing to connect back with you? Because it does work. It takes time, and there will be disappointments and heartbreaks in between those moments. But here's the thing, is that you got to keep your love on. Turn it on and break the handle. Keep it on no matter what they do, no matter what they do. Because having the love, and they see it during the tough times, that's the thing that creates trust for them, because you're consistent. Where many parents that are like either a foster care parent or step parents, where they messed up in this area, is that when they're giving the love and they don't see immediate responses or reciprocation of that love, they stop and they're not consistent anymore with demonstrating love. And the child gets the message, oh, your love is only conditional when I do good. And so what is that saying to the child? What message are we sending, that I'm only accepted if I do good things? And so I'm not accepted if I make mistakes and make bad choices. Well, that's when you need the most acceptance.
Exactly. I definitely agree. Like being showing the stepchild, and of course your biological child, that love and care. I guess that's where they would respect you more. They would show you more respect. And because growing up, when let's say a child does something that they just want to be disrespectful or something like that, but showing them that love, that allows them to know that they trust you and things of that nature. So I definitely agree with the whole aspect of on that side. So I have another question. Eric, Placida, I know you said Eric's kids, his biological kids' mom had passed away. But for people out here that has the step parents and their biological parents, can you guys give some advice on jealousy from the biological parents? Let's say, because that's where the drama comes in, and the biological parent be like, oh, I don't want my child around this person, or I don't want this person doing this for my child because I'm here and I want to do this, or whatever the case may be. So do you guys have some insight or advice for a young couple that may be dealing with that side of blended families?
Yeah, I actually do, because that's my, not that we're dealing with jealousy in this day and age, but my children's dad is still very alive, and he is remarried, and so they have two sets of parents, right? Mm-hmm. And so The advice that I would give starts with the scripture, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and everything else is from the evil one, right? And the reason I say that is because boundaries are going to be crucially important as you rebuild after a breakup, right? So no one got into, well, hopefully those two people didn't get into the relationship with the intention of being apart, right? They got into a relationship, they decided to have children, or maybe the children were surprised, one way or the other, they have children together. Somewhere along the way, they decided to go their separate ways. Well, what happens often is that one or the other still wants control where they once had it. Let me say that again. One or the other, meaning the ex-wife or husband, or wants control of the other party where they used to have a say and now they no longer have one. However, they do have a say in the life of the children, and those two things are separate. The problem is when we blur the lines, right? When I want to tell you what you're doing at your house and you want to tell me, well, some of those privileges get revoked when you make a decision to exit the relationship. And so what can be sound is when what is ideal, let me say it this way, is if the couple or the two people that used to be a couple are able to sit down, and then even in a grander way, if all four can sit down and create some boundaries for the relationship that will keep them safe, that will align with everyone's values. You guys know, I think, and I know that most of the time it may end up there someday, but it doesn't usually start there. So what you have to do as an individual, so I'll speak from my perspective. What I had to do was I had to get uncomfortable being firm in my decisions. So I'll give you an example. I had to get uncomfortable with not knowing what was going on at his house. I had to understand that I would be uncomfortable with that. So when we first broke up, I was still bringing groceries over to his house to make sure my kids ate at his house. Placida. The problem is control, ladies. We want control where we're not, we no longer have it. I had to yield to the fact that my decision-making had me in a place, not his decision-making, my decision-making had me in a place where I currently exist. Good, bad, or indifferent. I had to understand that he loves his children. Unless there's a reason to believe that there's some abuse going on or something crazy, I have to yield the right for him to parent his children while they're in his care. I also can give preferences and we can have discussions and give or take, but the bottom line is I no longer have control over there. And I have to release that. I have to make sure that there are boundaries for my home. For example, I did have a younger child when we separated who would go back and pretty much be a news reporter for everything that was going on in my house over there. And I had to help him understand that what goes on over here, it's not a secret, but you don't have to feel responsible that you know everything that goes on in my house. Question, tell daddy to call mommy.
Right. And that needs to be communicated and understood clearly from the beginning that, hey, when both parties, when both parents on both sides, all four, are co-parenting together, that needs to be clarified and understood that, hey, we're going to respect one another's households. We're not going to interrogate the kids, question kids about what's going on in the other place. Again, unless it's something legal or something like that going on, which you know, which is
most of the time, to be honest, it's not that. It's just the fact that we don't want some other girl, woman talking to our children, disciplining our children. No, she didn't give her a sip from her soda. Who do you think she is? That's my baby. Go have your own children. Like, we want to bring the drama, but when the drama comes back to our house, we want to blame the other party.
Right.
So, thank you for answering that. In the Bible, I don't know the order. My mother mentions it often. What's the order of family? Is it like God, husband, children, and then everybody else falls in line? But
So
I mentioned,
God,
uh-huh.
husband, wife, children.
Okay, so I mentioned that because I have heard of situations where, like, let's say the stepchildren and the step parent don't get along, and then it's like the wife or whatever, the biological parent's responsibility to pick one. Like, I know people who would kick their children out, or like sent them to be with their biological parent because they don't get along. What advice do you have for situations like that? Because to me, I think that if your biological child was there before your current husband or wife, you should make something happen. You should never put your child on the back burner. I mean, nothing against.
So you should put your child on the back burner, but the beauty of a solid blended family is that you would never have to. Right? You should never have to be put in a position where you have to choose. Because if I love him, there's no way in the world that I would want his children to suffer, right? And if he loves me, there's no way in the world that, because that person's suffering is me suffering, right? I mean, if I'm suffering, if my children are suffering, I'm suffering. If his children are suffering, he's suffering. So how can we call it a solid union if we are not caring for what comes from union, right? Or what came from each of us as individuals. So back up a little bit. That does not change the order of God. We confuse that because we like to confuse emotions with spirituality. And as a practice, what I am going to say is this. We talked in the very beginning about education. A lot of things need to be brought into the light before they become entrenched issues, deep-rooted issues that are now causing people to have to be put out of the house, or I gotta choose her over my children. No, we don't have to choose each other over our children. We choose to follow the order of God, but we also choose to love our children, which says we are responsible for our children. So we don't say, oh, you're only responsible for your biological child, not your child. No, we're responsible for our children because his children are now my children because of our union.
That's it. And it goes back to what we were saying back a couple of minutes ago, is that this is why it has to be, if you make this a priority, it has to be an unescapable priority, that as you are connecting with the partner or potential partner, that you are intentionally going around connecting with those kids so that they can start to get used to you, that they can see, so that you can, because guess what, they're still working through some of the trauma from the breakup, from the divorce, loss of the prior relationship. So they are going to need secure attachment. They're going to need to see consistency for trust to take place.
Mm-hmm.
When consistency and love, and consistency is not there, guess what? How they have a right to not trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the bottom line. And so it's up to the parent to step back and say, what am I not doing?
Mm-hmm.
And also getting help, getting support,
Mm-hmm.
getting professional support if it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would also say this is the importance of taking out the time to allow yourself to be trained and to be teachable and to see what your priorities are. Because really, this whole thing about, so let me say this. So going back to the thing of God, husband, wife, kids, we look at that and think that it has to be instant overnight. No, it doesn't. Who said that? He said do it.
We have to figure this thing out. We have to figure it out.
It's possible when Placida, God was her.
Absolutely.
When I came along, she had to grow into allowing me to be the head. Even though in theory I am the head, she had to grow it in her heart and mind. Same thing with these kids.
Why do we think it's different?
They have to, the person that's from the outside, step parent, they have to grow. We have to grow together in the co-parenting process. In other words, the parent, when that comes to this favoritism thing, we have to learn how to grow into where the child is going to fit. Not just, well, this is always going to be like this. My kid's going to be first. No, we're all going to grow in this together.
So with that, that's a really good point. And I also want to say something else about, so the favoritism piece. We have to be honest. Honesty is like, we have to be courageous enough to say, you know, I can see why Alexia and Mariah, who are my two daughters, it's really hard for me to say stepdaughters.
It's hard.
It's really hard. But they're my two daughters that came from Eric. They're my bonus daughters. I can see why at times they feel that I might favor Sydney, who is my biological daughter, or there's favoritism there. But you know what? They allow for me and Sydney's relationship to be what it was and always has been, and they don't feel anything because we have created our own relationships. My relationship with Mariah is very different than my relationship with Alexia. It's still our own relationship, so we don't have to compare them to one another. And that goes back to the other point that I wanted to bring up, which is responsibility. You said something, Destiny. You said, I've heard of parents having to put a child out or sending them back to be with their biological parent, the other biological parent, because of the issue that was going on with the step parent. I'm going to tell you this. There are parents, biological parents, that put children out. We use step sometimes as an excuse. Let's be responsible enough to say, my mom caught me having sex in the house with somebody. She came home and she put me out. She didn't put me out because I was a stepchild. She put me out. That's what it was. We made it something that wasn't. Let's everybody responsible in the relationship. Let's the parents start my responsibility. Hey, you know what? When I was talking to you yesterday, I was responsible. I was raising my voice. I cussed at you. My bad. I was wrong. There's really no excuse for that. I'll be honest, what was happening with me was I was hurt. I was very surprised by your behavior, and I was hurt. And so I acted out. Please forgive me for that. We can't even get to what happens next until I take responsibility for how I showed up.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, and it's a skill that we teach, and it's called establishing appropriate expectations that are realistic, and you have to do that according to a child's age and capacity. And there's some things that you need to consider. You need to consider their background, their history. Mm-hmm. You know, how many times has mom brought a new guy around, and how did that work out? Or how many times did dad bring a new girl around? How did that work out? You know, that's how these kids might be triggered by seeing somebody else. Oh no, now she's gonna marry him, or he's gonna marry her. See that? So some of this stuff falls on the parent handling themselves in a way that is, can I say, responsible and healthy. And so that is one thing. Another thing that needs to be considered when establishing realistic expectations is not only background, but individual differences and preferences. Their readiness, trying to make a child ready to accept somebody when they're still working through their own hurt, pain, and trauma. They're still in the grieving, their life state of grieving. They're probably maybe just maybe
bargaining. Well, you sure you don't want to get that, Daddy? You sure? Right?
Right. Or was it something I did? Like maybe I was a good boy or good girl. Maybe mom and dad wouldn't have broke up and this wouldn't be happening. You see what I'm saying? So that's another thing. So another thing too is how's the child responding to structure? You know, how are they responding to that? How are they able to plan and structure? How are they responding to positive reinforcement? If they're not liking your gift, find out what they like. They might say, screw your gift. I don't like that. Well, find out what they do. See, the goal is this. Be diligent about finding out what fills their heart and then start filling it.
Mm-hmm. No, we're passionate about this.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about it.
This is good though.
Your comment about like responsibility made me think about when I was active in therapy. I used to be like, oh, but this person made me feel like this, so then I did this, and I think that was my first session. And everyone needs to hear this. It's called the ABC method. A is the action, B is how it made you feel, and C is how you chose to react. And although, you know, like when we talked about like, oh, your child did something disrespectful to the stepdad, so they put you out, when in reality, it's about accountability, and it's all a process, a cycle, like a reaction. So I felt like that was something to share for everyone.
Yeah, that's really
so
good. That's really
so
good,
good.
Destiny. And that was your first session
Yeah.
to that therapist because because a lot of time, unfortunately, and even as parents, we're existing in victim mode. What somebody did to us, and we use our victimhood to justify future wrongdoing. And we know it's wrong, but we feel justified in doing it because well, they did that to me. Well, guess what? You have the responsibility to create the life you want to live. And if you live out of victim mode, you're always living in a reaction. You're reacting to instead of responding to what has happened to you in life. You get to create your next. Do you want? I remember being in the this was the depth of my depression, and the Lord met me there. And what He said to me was, "Are you going to allow that person to continue to steal from you? I made you how I made you." And because in my mind, I wasn't going to be the good person that I used to be. This is the story I was telling myself. And we all tell ourselves stories. So my narrative was, I'm a good person, and I was treated wrong. I was mishandled. So therefore, I'm not going to be a good person more. All right, watch out, because I'm coming. Like, I know how to play this game, and I'm going to play it, and I'm going to get what I need. And God was like, but if you do that, then they win, because you know how I made you. There are some tweaks. First, let's start with what you contributed to the situation. Let's start with how you showed up, what you chose to not see, how you chose to betray your own core values. Let's start with all of that. And then we can get to what that got you. What was the outcomes, right? And then you can make a decision about how you want to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to the show has to come to a close, but before we close, there are just two more questions that we wanted to touch on. Now, earlier you had said something about you don't want to call her your stepdaughter, you're just your daughter. So speaking of those terms, do you require your stepchild to call you mom or by your name? How do you feel about that? And does the term stepmom or stepdad, do you feel offended, or how do you feel about that term?
So we use the term only for reference, right? In our family. This is our family. I don't feel any way about it for the world. It just, this kind of goes back to what we said initially, is that you have to allow your family to be who your family is and figure that out together and allow the children to have a voice in that. Well, my children's voice spoke up very early. So my two of my children, my youngest, who is Josiah, and Eric's youngest boy, and my oldest girl, who is Alexia, Eric's oldest girl. They both call me mom on their own. No one ever asked them to. no one, and then in fact, they called me mom before we ever even got married.
Yeah,
because they knew that they knew we were getting married, and I was already playing that role. In fact, our situation's a little different. They had a long distance relationship, and I'm a super committed mom, and I saw the school system that they were in prior to us getting married, and I didn't like it, and I knew that they would be moving to where we were, so they moved in with me before he moved in with me, and so they were living as my children before we even got married, right? And so they called me mom because I was their mom. But notice I left out one. That Mariah, she's the most like me. And she was checking me out. She was making sure I was going to treat her dad good. That was the main thing. She wasn't even really married. She wasn't even worried about herself. She was really checking me. Like, chick, I see you. I'm watching you, right? She did not call me mom. And she didn't have to. But when she decided to, it was from her heart. And it was after we were married. And after, it's funny because I remember the first time that I disciplined Mariah, like disciplined her. Girl, she was packing up her bags and she was moving back to Philly. And she was like, this is what I found out later. All the talk that was happening in the back room. But it was after that point of discipline. Shortly thereafter, she began calling mom. And that's interesting. Right. That's interesting because believe it or not, we know we need discipline. And you're not really sure about somebody until y'all go through something hard. Yeah. You're never really sure about your relationship until you've gone through something difficult and you endure.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so sadly our conversation has to come to a close shortly, but I have one final question. Being that it's the holiday season, do you feel entitled to having your children spend the holidays with you as opposed to the other side of the family? And if not, how is the process of sharing? Because you got to share.
How many minutes we got for this part?
Yeah, because that's actually, it's hard. This is our first year really experiencing being away from our kids a lot, because now we're just we're like really far away from where we used to live now. And so, we do expect them. We know that it's healthy for them. If they have a significant other.
They're talking about the parenting though.
Oh, the parenting. We really don't have a problem. We just want them to make a decision. Yes. Do we naturally in ourselves want them to hang with us? Absolutely, because that's what we've been used to. Mm-hmm. And there have been holidays where they have been when both parents, with us and our children's biological parents, when we all lived a little closer, it was easy. But now, me personally, I don't have that issue in terms of.
Well, let me tell you what happened. Yeah. Okay, y'all. So the back end of the story is that our separation agreement actually alternated holidays. Mm-hmm. So like if they were with us on one holiday, they would be with the other. Like if they were with us on Christmas, they would be with the other family on Thanksgiving. What ended up happening for us is that we do Christmas in our house. Okay? We do it. And so my kids was like, I'm going to mommy's. Like, I'm going over there. And because they didn't really do it, they really didn't have a problem with releasing them.
It worked out.
So it just, for most of the time, we like pretty much have them every Christmas. And the Thanksgiving, sometimes they go to other families, but what we'll do is, if that's the case, then we'll do Thanksgiving day after at our house so that they can also experience Thanksgiving the day after. So we just do what we need to do. We honestly keep it as the primary focus. Yeah. We don't make it about ourselves. Yeah. Right. We make it about loving them and making sure they're safe and secure, not just physically, but emotionally. Yeah. One of the things that I went through, and I'm going to say this real quick, as a child, is having to choose. Having to choose mom and dad. And that was the hardest and most traumatic thing for me as a young child. And I vowed, and one of the reasons why I fell into that depression was I felt like I was doing the same thing to my children that I vowed never to do, but the decision was not mine to make. Someone else made that decision. So I personally vowed to not ever be the reason that my kids have to feel torn. And I pray that people will learn how to co-parent in such a way that keeps the children at the forefront and not their personal preferences.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing as a word of advice for parents that are struggling in this area is get help. And make sure when you get help, you get a counselor, a therapist, or a coach that specializes in dealing with blended families, that understands family systems, that specializes in this area, as well as understand trauma and how trauma plays into this.
Yep.
You know, because if you go to a general practitioner, they may not be hitting the part, and then we can say, oh, they're this diagnosis, or they're crazy, or this, that type of thing. And we want to provide the best support and care for the whole family.
Amen.
Okay, so I do want to thank you two for joining us on the show and having this conversation. I'm sure anybody that is watching really can take heed to the advice and insight that you guys have given us. It's definitely been a great conversation.
Yeah. And I did learn a lot. Thank you guys so much for informing me. I don't necessarily think I want kids, but this was a beautiful experience.
Okay, Justin, I'll see you in 10 years and see if you say the same thing. All right, well, thank you guys for having us. If anyone wants to reach out to us, we can be reached at braswellness.com. Braswellness.com is how you get in touch.
Yeah. And check us out on our Facebook page.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. Now, before we actually close the show, here at Elevation Global Media Group, we usually end the show with, telling people about God and how He is the one that, let's say if you are in a blended family, He is the one that can help you make it work. If you speak with Him, and our scripture in Romans 10:9, if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. So for those of you out there that may have said this for the first time or may not have ever heard of it, you can always go pray and talk to God. Maybe go to your local church or someone that you may know to help you find God and be able to help you through any situation. And prayer works. That's just what I'm going to say.
Right.
Prayer definitely works. So we would just like
God is the head.
Yes, definitely. God is the head of any household. So as long as you keep Him first in any relationship, then He will grow that relationship and prosper it to be what you want it to be. But again, I would like to thank you guys for joining the show with us today. And thank you all viewers for watching. And I hope that you guys got something out of this show. You can catch the Young and Bold show right here on Elevation Global Media Group every fourth Monday of each month. And we would like to wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, and have a great day.
See you next time.
Take care.